Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take the wheels off, because it's always easier to clean your bike if the wheels are off. If you don't have a stand, you can do it with the wheels on, but I prefer to do it with wheels off. So we're going to release take the pressure off our brakes. Some brakes have different mechanisms for doing that, and then what we'll do is we'll change to our smallest cog in the back, and that'll make it a lot easier to remove this rear wheel. So just bring it on down to that last cog, and then what we're going to do is go around over here, release the wheel, take it out. You see the chain is going to drag a little bit on the frame. That's okay, but what we want to do as we clean the frame is make sure that we try to avoid the chain as much as possible. We're going to get to the chain in just a little bit, but right now we're trying to get all this dirt and everything off the frame first. One thing you'll notice on the front wheel, when you release the brakes and release your quick releases, that the wheel doesn't just fall out. It has most bicycle frames have a flange that is around here on the bottom of the fork, and that keeps your wheel from falling off if your quick release ever failed while you're riding down the road. So that it's a safety feature. So we're going to go ahead and unscrew this a little bit, and it'll allow that front wheel to pop right off. So at this point we've got our frame without wheels, and we can go ahead and start wiping it down a little. What I typically will do is use a wet paper towel first, just to get all the major grime off. And if my bike has any kind of grease or anything like that on it, I might use some simple green like this to help get some of the grease off the frame. But mainly what you want to do is just kind of make sure you get all the sand and grit and all the road stuff off. There's places of the bike that really need special attention. Around the brakes is one thing. You never want to get any kind of greasy substance or any kind of thing like that on your brakes. Your brakes have to be as greaseless as possible so that they can actually stop you when you need them to. So I usually spend a little extra time around the brakes, make sure the brakes get all clean and pretty and dirt free, because that's what keeps you safe on the road. So I'll wipe everything down, try to avoid that chain. You can see it, this particular place right in here gets very, very dirty because it's where all the road grime gets spun up from the back wheel onto your frame. So if you can't take your wheels off, you're going to want to try to get at this, but it's a little harder to do with the wheels on the bike. So get all that grime off. Take care of your cranks. One of the nice things about keeping your bike clean is that you'll start to get to know wear items on your bike. So if something starts to wear out, you'll see it when you're cleaning your bike. If you don't clean your bike regularly, you won't see those items. And cracks in your frame and things like that will all of a sudden sneak up on you. So you can take things off, like this little pump here, so that you can get at things. Wipe it all down good. And you can see my bike is kind of loose in the stand here. It kind of pivots a little bit. That's on purpose. This particular bike has a integrated seat mast, so there's not a seat post, a traditional seat post like you would see on most bikes. So if you've got that, you want to be real careful, because if you put your bike in a stand without a seat post and you grab onto the frame, you can damage the frame. So I've got it in here pretty loose so that it doesn't damage the frame. And you can see I'm just going around the frame. This area under here gets particularly dirty, so you want to spend a little time with that. If you've got a lot of sand or dirt, be careful not to grind it in. It will scratch your paint if you've got a nice paint job on your bike. So same thing on the front brakes, just like we did on the back brakes. We spent a little extra time making sure that the brake surfaces are clean. I'm going to come back and do this again in just a second with a clean paper towel, because this one's got all the goop from the whole bike on it. So here I am giving this a second once over in the front here. Your front brakes actually are about 70% of your stopping power of your bike. So it's real important that your front brakes are functioning well, good and clean. And we're going to talk about cleaning your wheels in just a few minutes as well. That's another important part of it. So here we go. We've got it pretty much wiped down, most of the major grit off. We're going to go ahead and take another paper towel just with water, and we're going to clean all the simple green off that we got on the frame, and then we're going to polish it up to make it really nice. So I'm going to skip the wiping off with the water because that's something. It looks a lot like what we just did. And the polish, I'll show you. I use this. It's a sunlight polish. You can get at some bike shops. There's also other bike polishes on the market. You can use anything like that. It'll help kind of protect your bike and keep it clean. So that's the frame, and then next we'll talk about wheels. So I will attempt to show you how I clean my wheels because I think wheel cleaning is one of the most important things you can do. Your wheels are what are responsible for keeping you on the road and stopping you when you need to stop as well. So it's important to maintain them and make sure that that you know what the condition of your wheels is at all times. So what I'm going to do is I've got a sink here that in my garage that I have access to. You may or may not have access to a sink that you can get as dirty as I get this one. You can use a hose outside to do this as well. It's not quite as easy, but can be done. So I'm going to show you the way I do this. And I'm only going to show you the back wheel because the back wheel is more complicated than the front wheel. The front wheel doesn't have the cassette on it, so it's a little easier to handle. All the same principles apply. So what I typically do, most sinks are the perfect size to fit a wheel in right inside of them, a 700cc wheel. So it's almost like they designed it for this job. So what I typically do is I'll get I'll start with the cassette because that's the greasy part, and then I'll work my way toward the outside of the rim. Wow. So I am going to use a couple different tools here to do this. I've got an old Boudreaux tool here, cleaning tool that I use on the cassette. I also will be using some simple green bike stuff. This is the same simple green as the stuff we use on the other thing, only it's an aerosol, so it foams up really nice, fills in all the cracks. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. I'll show you how I clean the cassette. The key is you never want to spray water directly on the cassette or on the axle. It's better to have it just kind of run over the cassette as you're rinsing it. Because you don't want to force any water into the bearings of the wheel because that could cause you a lot of problems down the road. But if you're real careful about not getting water spraying directly in there or forcing it into there, then you're usually pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. I usually do this with hot water just because it helps crack the grease a little bit better. So I moisten the cassette a little bit, then put some of this degreaser on here. Once again, it doesn't take a whole lot. You don't have to bury it in degreaser. And then just kind of take all the excess grease off of there, or the oil from the chain. Get it nice and clean. This is a fairly new cassette, so it'll probably shine up pretty easily. And you can see that this long bristle brush like this is just perfect for this job. I also have used paint brushes before, obviously paint brushes that haven't been used to paint with, but you can, a long bristle paint brush, especially one with plastic bristles, works really well for this job. So then just kind of gently rinse it. Once again, you don't want to submerge the cassette or the free hub or any of that kind of stuff. You just want to kind of rinse it. You can see it cleans up really nice and well. So I'm going to real quick put a towel on that, dry it off just a little bit so there's not standing water on it. Go ahead and do that. What I'm going to do, and I'll tell you first and then I'll show you, is I'm going to spray the entire rim surface. I'm going to wet it down a little bit. I'm going to spray it with the simple green. Then I'm going to go around and wash it really well. Simple green will take off any residual oil that got on here from the chain or from road or anything else. And then after that, we're going to dry it, and I'll show you how we're going to maintain it moving forward. Because once you take all the grease and everything, or the oils out of each of these spoke nipples, we'll want to add back a little bit of oil in there to help keep these in good shape. So I'm going to go ahead and start that. Once again, just kind of wet it first, all around the rim. This is a great time to inspect spokes. Make sure you don't have any loose spokes. Make sure nothing's doing anything funny. So now that everything's nice and damp, I've got a sponge that I've got that's wet, and I'll turn this water off to save some water, and go ahead and put my simple green on. You can see this foam coats really well, makes a really nice cleaning surface. And then what we're going to do is I'll start right here at the valve so that I can keep track of where I am. Just kind of go around and scrub. Get the tires too, because there's, it'll give you a chance to see if there's any funny business going on with your tires. And I usually use just the rough side of one of these dual purpose sponges. It seems to work really well. It doesn't scratch up the rims or anything, but it will remove any excess oils and things from your rims. Alright, so at this point the wheels are all clean. I want to go back and dry this off really well. I'll go around and make sure that the wheels get nice and dry, spokes as much as possible. So we've got the wheels back on the bike now, and our next step is going to be to clean this chain. So the chain has grease on or oil on it, and so as you can imagine, it tracks a lot of dirt when you're riding on a nasty rainy day. So first thing I'm going to do is I've got an old rag that you see that I've used this for many chain cleaning sessions before. We're going to do the same thing today. We're going to clean this chain, just kind of get all the goop off of it. So I'm just kind of squeezing it side to side, pedaling backwards, get all that stuff off. Then I'll go top to bottom as well. You can see I'm just pinching it between my fingers like this, top to bottom. You want to stay away from the gears. Don't want to get your fingers caught in any of the gears. So this middle section on the bottom seems like a great place to do this. You can also do this if you don't have a stand, just by leaning your bike up against something solid where it won't move. The only key is you have to have room for that other crank on the other side not to hit a wall or anything. But you can do this anywhere else, or you can have somebody else hold the bike for you. All right, so now we've got the chain kind of wiped down. Hopefully we've got most of the grit and grime off of it. And so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to apply some new lube to the chain. So I like this Tri-Flow lube. It it penetrates really well, and it tends to give a really nice smooth chain ride. I've tried a million different things, and all of them are pretty good. But for this just is what I have in the house right now, and it seems to work really, really well. So what we're going to do is, hopefully you can see this. Let's take a look at the camera angle right up here. Let me move this just a little bit so you can see. So what I'm going to do is I usually do this right on the top of the cassette, just because it's easiest and it makes the least amount of mess. So 1 drop per gear, the chain here. So you can see how this goes. Just sort of putting a little bit on each part of the chain as I go around. This takes a little while, but I tell you what, this is the way to do it. All right, now that we've lubed the whole chain, we're going to run it around a couple different times. Now you got to watch out when you do this. If you do it inside your house, obviously there's oil on that chain and it can splatter onto your floor, things like that. I've got a protective mat down here in my shop, and that keeps it from making a mess. But if you only put 1 drop on each little segment of the chain, then it probably is not going to be too bad. So once you kind of spin it around a little bit If you want to, you can go through your gears so that the oil gets on each of the gears that we just cleaned, but I'm not going to go through that today. What I'm going to do now is just kind of wipe the excess lube off. This is a real key step because too much oil is just as bad as not enough oil. You want to make sure that you, once again, side to side, you pinch on the sides of the chain, pinch on the top and the bottom of the chain, and just kind of take off all the excess lube. You only want the lube in the moving parts in the middle, and you're just wiping it off the outside parts, where it really doesn't do anything other than attract dirt. Wheels, most people never pay attention to this, and I tell you what, it's an important thing to do, because what happens is spoke failures frequently happen right here, right where the spoke enters the spoke nipple, and that's also the part closest to the road. So it gets very grimy and dirty. If you're going to have any rust or anything like that, if you've got steel parts, that's where it's going to happen, right in this part right in here. So what I typically do is I'll start with the where the valve stem is, and I'll go around and I'll put 1 drop of that same lube we use on the chain on every one of these. So as we go around, 1 drop. 1 drop. And you don't want to put too much, because remember, we just cleaned these wheels, and it's important not to have any oil on your braking surface, which is right next door. So just the tiniest little bit is all you need. And we're going to go around the whole wheel like this, putting 1 drop on each of these. And as it moves around, as the wheel moves around, it'll go up and it'll go down, and it'll fill in all those little gaps on there. And then we're going to come back and wipe off the excess, just like we did with the chain. Only on this one, we're going to use a really clean rag, because we don't want to get any excess stuff anywhere near that braking surface. So now we've got everything lubed there. I've got a paper towel here. We're going to go and we're just going to wipe each of these off. Make sure that there's not any extra that's going to flow down onto the braking surface of the rim. And that's going to keep these wheels humming right along. Chain. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this, and let me change your camera view so you can see it. Right up under here is the cable that runs the rear derailleur. So I've got some of that oil already on here, and so what I can do, I'm going to put a little bit more on there just so I make sure I get it, is I'm going to run some of that right along this cable here. Just enough to keep it nice and clean and lubed up. Okay? We also have, if you can see it, there's a cable that comes up. Let's see if it's in the camera view. Yeah. So it comes up through this. This is a carbon frame, and it comes up through here and up all the way up to the front derailleur. And we're going to do something a little different on that. I'm going to put just a drop of lube right up against that cable. I'm not sure if you'll be able to see this or not. And what will happen is that oil will run right down that cable and through that hole, and it'll lube that chain all the way down to here. And so we'll wait a few seconds for that to kind of do its thing, and I'm going to wipe it. Alright. So now I'm going to get any excess off. And there we go. So now, on this particular bike, this has internally routed cables. So let me back up a little bit and show you what I'm talking about. So on this bike, you can see right here, here's the rear derailleur cable running right here, and it goes inside the frame, and it runs all the way down the frame and then comes out where we just were in the back. So this protects the cable really well from weather and grime and things like that. Now, you may have a bike similar to this one here, in which the cables, if you can see, there's a brake cable right there, and there's also derailleur cables down here. if your cables are exposed like this, you also should take some of that lube and put it on a paper towel and just gently wipe those cables down. You don't want a lot of excess oil on them. You just want enough to where they'll stay protected and won't rust. Alright, so we've got the bike all cleaned. At this point, it's pretty much ready to go on the next ride. You've got your rims and wheels clean, you've got spoke nipples lubed, you've got your cassette is clean, your chain is clean, you've put a little bit of lube on cables. The last thing to do probably after a ride through a bunch of grime and grit and stuff like that to make sure is let's make sure that the headset is all good and sound. One of the things you probably should do before every ride is to grab the front brakes and rock the bike back and forward. And you want to make sure there's no play in the bottom or the top of your headset right here. These are the bearings that allow your front wheel to move. And if this is not good and snug to where if there's any play at all and you're going down a hill or you're hitting bumps, then you could lose control of your bike and you could crash and get hurt very seriously. So always you want to make sure that that's well taken care of. There are a couple adjustment screws on the top and on your stem that help make sure that you've got the right compression here. But make sure that you've got that all taken care of as your last step. And then you could store your bike for the next ride. So thanks for joining us for this bike maintenance tip, and we'll see you on the road.